What you're looking at here is the company. I retired at 55, which was a few years ago. No comments about old. We don't say old, okay? And retiring is the worst thing in the world that ever happened to me. My wife will tell you I polished my cars about 3 days and I was looking for a job. So I went back. In fact, returned to Kentucky. I walked into Murray State University in the same classroom I did 35 years ago. And looked out and I think some of the same students were there. But teaching anatomy and physiology, which I organized back in 74, 75. So I've been around the block. Aquaculture of Kentucky, known as AOK. You see at the bottom, we're interested in paddlefish because paddlefish is a new fish to be tried to cultivate commercially and aquacultured because of the pesticides, because of the things we're having in our environment. The fish from the river, a lot of times you'll see, do not eat. And, well, ours have no lead. They have no insecticides. They have none of the problems, any of the chemicals you see. So when we looked at this, we found a place. Oops, I need the right one. We found a place in Callaway County, just about 1/8 of a mile from where I used to live, and it's 200 square acres. We put in a well here at the top. This well kicks out about 1,500 gallons a minute. And the farm I had in Arkansas had 12 wells that kicked out 2,500 gallons a minute. There was 1,500 acres of water, which meant there was a lot of land. There was like 27 employees, a lot of problems. And we distributed fish worldwide. We did it by air shipping 200 packages in the morning, 200 packages in the afternoon, Taiwan, Israel, Italy, and then we had 3 semis on the road. I got tired, so after a few years, retired, I thought. So what we have now, this is a picture of our farm. These are the ponds we have built. We have about 70 acres now. We're developing, we hope to develop 120 acres. It was easier building 1,500 acres in Arkansas than it is building 120 in Kentucky. It's been a nightmare, but it's been fun. Okay, if you look at this, the gentleman, every one of these guys has retired. This gentleman on this side, oops, Larry here. Larry's my pastor, Baptist pastor. He retired from Callaway County as school superintendent. The guy on the right retired from Peoria Caterpillar. He retired after 30 years at 48 years old. The guy in the middle, we won't talk about that, but all these guys are over 60. And this is the labor, this is the brains, that's all of us there are. We are known Senior Citizen Seining Crew. Or, you saw the name of our farm, AOK. Some people want to change that, suggested that we change it to Old Farts Fish Farm. I should have said Fellows, shouldn't I? I shouldn't have said that. All right. Anyway, you can see we pull these fish up to the seine. Here's another one about the size of this one. We'll talk about that fish a little later. That's a paddlefish. She's loaded with eggs. We also have another well, and this well is a large well, has 2 pumps in it. It supplies the underground water for our hatchery and for our holding vats. In our holding vat, 75-foot building, it has 8 concrete vats that are 32 foot long, 6 foot wide, 2 foot deep. The last farm I had 32 of those. So we're downsized, okay? And inside the hatchery, we pull the water in. And inside this hatchery building, which is 60 by 80 feet, we have these 1,500 gallon tanks. We have 14 of them. They're laid in an L shape. When we bring the water into the building, the water comes up here, over, goes through a large black pipe for degasification, carbon dioxide because it's well water. There's the degasification. Then it runs through sand filters to knock out what little iron there is in it. Then it runs over to a boiler. This boiler supplies the rest of the building. And you can see we bring the water from 55 degrees to 65 degrees. Here we are after we've got them all set up. The L lays in this manner. We elevated it. What you see right here, these glass jars with plastic we'll talk about in their McDonald's jars, this is where we put the eggs to start them hatching. This is what it looks like when it's running. There's water continually in here that flows down into these McDonald's jars. There's a pipe down the middle of these jars. Water comes down the bottom and swirls up, and comes up on the outside, goes over into a drain or into these tanks. These McDonald's jars are like the water rolling in a stream. They keep the eggs. Mother Nature, these eggs adhere, and they stick someplace, but they're rolling constantly as a ball down the Ohio River, down the Mississippi River, and these things hatch by the millions. Very few survive. Well, we can't afford that. So you'll see what we do with them here in just a moment. All right, broodstock. Well, broodstock is very important. Was able to come across broodstock with one of the university professors here in Kentucky. He was a student at Land Between the Lakes when I was a professor there, and I've known him for years. He was interested in these paddlefish, so it took him to get domesticated broodstock. He had to have the adults removed from the wild, take their offspring, raise them to 9 years till they're fertile and had eggs. Then he had to spawn them, and that spawn is what I'm using for broodstock. So there's over 25 years invested in just the broodstock. All right, so we drop a gill net. It's not monofilament. And we stretch it out. They hit it, they swim through it, they fight it, they entangle themselves, and since they're force breathers, they have to be swimming to have the water pass over the gills. You can't leave them in the net because they'll suffocate. So you get to sit on the nets a lot. You bring them up, and now they're all entangled, so you've got to figure out how they went in, back them out, throw them on the boat, throw them in the container behind me. And the hard part for this guy is getting up that hill every day with a fish that weighs 42 pounds. We had some other pictures of my sister-in-law pushing me, okay? So that was last year, in fact. It's pretty cold. We get her in the tank, check her. She looks like she's got eggs. We bring her to the hatchery. We weigh this fish. At that same time, we put yarn in their back dorsal so that we can identify them. And this fish right here is my wife's favorite. Her name is Gertie. You see she's tagged, she's weighed. You see that notch out of her bill? Someone hit her in the lake with a propeller. And most of these things repair themselves. This is one of the few fish I've ever seen. We have been able to spawn her 3 years straight. Unbelievable. Okay? We have this big swimming pool. You buy them on sale at Walmart when no one else buys them. You go out there this time of year and you've got it filled. It's this color. It's filled up. It's really low right now. You can see it's folded down. So now we've got her. We bring her in, turn her upside down, and they just quit fighting. They're docile. They're the most docile fish I've ever seen. I did a lot of work in endocrinology, in stress. This would be a great fish to look at, find out how they suspend themselves to handle their stress. They just kind of go to sleep. When you put them back in the lake, you have to slap them, wake them up before they go off, or they'll lay there and die. So this fish is phenomenal. This is a very ancient fish. You cut her in the midline, you take a syringe, put it down there, it's got a little tube on it, and you pull up the individual eggs. You see that she's got eggs, and then right away, there's my wife stapling them. We staple her back together, we dump her back in. Before we dump her back in, we give her some LHRH, which is luteinizing hormone releasing hormone. Just be a releasing factor, if you want to put it that way. This is synthetic. This is man-made. So this is a human hormone. It brings her to release her eggs. We put her back in the pond. We've got a number of males, a number of females. They're all tagged. You can see the green on this one, for instance. Well, that male is telling that female he knows she's about to let go of those eggs. We have to keep looking at the bottom of the tanks for 24 hours to see if they're releasing any eggs at all, because we've got to take the eggs the minute they start, they're ready. So last year we watched this male, and boy, when they were ready, he started to bump them just like they would in the wild. So, and these are domesticated fish. We take her out, make an incision just by her vent, just a little above the vent, incision about that long, and we have to force all those eggs out of there. This is a group of students. and you've got to squeeze, and you've got to squeeze, and you've got to squeeze. You're squeezing about 4 to 5 pounds of eggs out of a hole about this big. Any of you who've been in or taken an animal apart, you've known that fish, all their eggs are in a sack. That's not true with this fish. This fish, its eggs lie on the outside like an accordion fold. So they normally have to go through the whole body, come up real high and go out that little hole and make their way out and all the way back down. Well, that's impossible with a hybrid striped bass, and with a large amount you squeeze the eggs, boy, they just roll out. Here you have to take them. So they're squeezing and they're squeezing, and we end up with a pan full of eggs. If you read that on the bottom, you'll see that we fertilize these eggs wet with 2 or 3 males. That's just to keep the genetic pool. All right, 1 male would probably do it, but we use 2, 3 different ones. And because they're adhesive, they come out in a lump and they stick to each other. We use Fuller's earth, which is nothing but a fine grade of clay. That fine grade of clay breaks those down so they're individual eggs. So they'll keep rolling in those jars. So we rinse them and clean them. And there are our jars. You get a little better view. Water comes in here, see a center pipe, goes to the bottom, spreads out underneath here, and those eggs are constantly rolling. Here's McDonald's jars. This is, 3 of them? 3 of them, 1 fish, wasn't it? Last year, 3 of this is from 1 fish, so we really had some females that had a lot of eggs. We're talking about 300,000 or more, up to 500,000 eggs. Those big blue tanks, we try to divide them when they're starting to hatch into 30,000 in each one of those tanks. This is what they look like when they're fertile. I don't know if you can see it back there. Can you see a little dot right there? See a little white spot and a black dot in the middle of it? That tells you those eggs are fertile. And that's just a couple hours after we fertilized them. It's at this time we make the decision. We have a customer we're going to ship overseas to. These eggs are ready to go right then. We pack them up. You'll see in a minute what we do. But that also gives us an idea how well our fertilization went and what we're going to have, hopefully what we're going to have for a hatch. This photograph is, some of you have had biology, I hope. You see this morula? I used to teach this in classrooms and never saw it as clearly as I did with these eggs. We did this with a 5-pixel Kodak camera on macro lens. And you can see how they start to develop. You're going to start to see individuals here. And you see that the neural development there? You start to see it developing around here. And you see it develops and it starts to form a tail. You can see little guys in here. And right now they're starting to move even. These eggs are 2 days old, a day? No, right there, those are hours. Those are hours. Those are hours. See his little eye? See the little mouth? So they're just moving around inside that egg. They're being whirled up and down, up and down, up and down. So once we think they're close to development, after 4 days they start to hatch. We hang them on the side of these big tanks, and as they start to hatch, they'll swim up. We've got a screen here that we pick up. They swim over and drop off into this blue tank. This is every one of those little gray things is a fish. They hatched. We had an accident. Power went out. We pulled it back on, saved the fish, and instead of taking 4 to 7 days to hatch, these things hatched within 5 minutes. Every one of them, every 30,000 of them hatched. Guess what I'm going to do this year? I'm not going to wait 7 days for that to hatch. So these little guys right here, you can see them coming out of the top of this jar, out of this McDonald's jar. See them swimming over. They're kind of tiny. Kind of tiny. This is when they're starting to hit the tank. This is when they filled that tank, top to bottom. That's a 4-inch standpipe in the middle. So once we've got them in there, we know they're going to start feeding in 4 days. We look for a little black plug in the back of their cloaca. When that drops out, they've used all the yolk. They need food. You raise this lid. It's got a belt in here. You pull it back. You load that with feed. And this little thing clicks along, and for 24 hours it feeds those fish. So every 24 hours, you get to pull that back, put feed on it, clean the vats. Clean the vats every 6 hours. That's the feed that we order, that some people have developed. It allows us to take these off from natural food, so we're not out there trying to get these rotifers and things out of the ponds. We no longer do that. That's what's making this practical, we hope. And see the color of that feed? What color are those little fish in the back there? They're pink. Well, when we change to another variety of food, black, they become black. So they're pretty translucent. You can tell how well they're feeding. It's not a problem. And as they feed, they get larger. They start to see their little bills. You see the stuff on the top, these little dots? That's floating feed. So we take them. I said I wasn't going to do that, didn't I? Sorry about that. These little guys are ready to free swim, and they're growing out. They're hitting the pellets on the top. They've changed from feeding as it's falling through the column. They cannot, when you first start them out, they can't smell that feed. They can't find it. They just swim through the water with their mouth open. And as they get to be adults, they've got these gill rakers, you know, like you've seen your whales. So these little guys, same way. So it's something else to get them on commercial feed. Now they're out in the pond, they're about 12 inches long, and now they're feeding on the top. And it's kind of fun. They have to learn to roll, turn sideways, reach over with their mouth, take a bite, which is unnatural for them, and roll back over. So it's kind of fun. You can start with 300,000. If you end up with 30,000, you have done something. So that tells you either learn to eat or you die. Now, we take these little guys right here, we put them in a pond that has 8 to 10,000 pounds of catfish per acre. How many tons is that? 4 to 5 tons of fish in there. They're feeding these catfish constantly. It's in a 5-acre pond. We put them out 200 per acre. They grow from that 12 inches to 6 pounds just by filtering the water in 1 year. Chinese, Taiwanese, they use grass carp, they use black carp, which I've raised a lot of black carp, a lot of Chinese carp, and they develop metric tons in a very small pond. This guy goes along with helping the water quality with the catfish, plus we want to take that fish as a food fish and use his meat. No feed. Now, if I pay that farmer $1 a pound, he makes $6 off fish that didn't cost him anything to feed, and he gets it every year instead of catfish that are a year and a half before he can harvest them. And these things, I can put a gill net out and take them out of the pond without ever touching a catfish. So that's what we're looking for. In 2 years, look how he's grown. Now he's 13 pounds. He gets up to 42 pounds in that pond in 7 years. That's a lot of caviar. That's a lot of fish. When they take caviar, you have the fish left over. They have to kill them to take the eggs for caviar. What we're looking at primarily is food fish. I mean meat for the restaurants. Fresh fillets. There's my young lady there. She's 8 years old. She's 60 pounds. There was a pond in Oklahoma where they grew, maybe 20 more pounds. They're 100 pounds in some places. In 1 year, in 8 years. My fish are 42 pounds. So there's something going on. When we get ready to ship fertilized eggs overseas, remember I told you that little black dot, that white circle around it? Well, here we are. Since I have to drive 8 hours to O'Hare Airport in Chicago through all that hell, we have to load them pretty early. We put, oops, let me back up. Got the wrong pointer. We put 10,000 eggs in each box. So if they order 250,000 eggs, that's a lot of boxes. This happened to be an order for 6 boxes. And they were going to Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic. So we take them, weigh them out, put them in there, fill them with a pound of water, a gallon of water, and then we put oxygen in the bag, tie it up, put 2 ice packs, blue ice on either side, seal them up, put them in the car and drive like devil, and it takes a year's worth of paperwork to move these from one country to the other. So we have shipped to China, we've shipped to Czechoslovakia, we've shipped to Belgium, and eventually we hope this will become a bigger part of our business. The government snafu trying to get the permit is the biggest holdup. How many people have ever eaten caviar? Anyone? Boy, I used to look at that and say, God, how can anybody do that? I've got a taste for it now. It's a good thing I raise them, right? What did we get? We had 4 pounds last year. One of my fish died, so I made caviar. And I'm on my last little jar. Those little jars are like $70, little 3-ounce jar. And some fish generate 10 to 14 pounds of caviar. These commercial fishermen out here fighting these floods right now, they're pulling in fish and they got 10 pounds, 14 pounds, at $125 a pound. Those fish are worth something. A 7-year investment in a fish that doesn't eat anything in your pond, you take him out and you make $200 to $300, you make $400 to $500 on that fish. That's pretty good profit. So caviar, the problem with caviar, the world likes it. And now it's been contaminated. Now it's been shut off. We're over harvesting. It has lots of problems. The paddlefish caviar is not beluga, but it's close enough. So it's a growing thing. The Chinese, there's only one other species of this paddlefish, and it was found in China. It no longer lives there. They have decimated it. So they're shipping in all these paddlefish eggs and starting over their populations. They want it for food. They want it for the eggs. Okay? And caviar looks like this. When you open up that fish, that's what you see. That's on one side. When you go to the other side, you have another one. There's 2 of them. Those are the ovaries. Those are all eggs. They're all adhered. They're all on the outside. So when you put them on a screen, you push it through this stainless steel screen, and those eggs fall down in the bottom. What's left is that ovary. It's like a fold. It looks like placenta is what it looks like when you get through with it. All right? So you end up with these eggs. You keep rinsing them, you keep rinsing them, and you wash them, and you wash them, and you finally get them clean. You dry them, you weigh them, and you salt them. It has to have a certain percent of salt. That's all they do to it to make caviar. This is a very special salt. Of course, you can't use iodized salt. And it's a really fine, fine salt. So when you get it done, you set it in these and you drain it. That's 3 pounds out of a 7-year-old fish. That's aquacultured caviar versus wild caviar. You pick through and you take the time, you try to pick out the fat. Okay? And that's what it looks like before you put it in these little 3-pound buckets, little white buckets. It's beautiful. That is pretty. People really get excited about that. We get a phone call from Japan every year. We get a phone call from California. Is your aquacultured caviar ready for production? No, not yet. So, the newest thing, smoker. We are going to smoke paddlefish fillets, paddlefish whole fish. When they take the caviar out, you end up with a fish that has about a 15-pound carcass. So we're going to smoke both these, the hybrid striped bass and catfish. They've been tested. People really like them. Cruise ships need them. To get them out of our country, the paddlefish, you have had a federal permit. So this is one fish that's been filleted, the one that caviar came out of. That's 12 pounds of meat there. That's my knife. So to give you an idea how big a piece of slab of meat that is. That laid on a plank and smoked sells for like $50-some per side. So it's sought after. This is what we just finished. We painted that floor in the dead of winter. I hate to paint. What we have here, I'll point out, we've got a walk-in cooler on the backside of freezer. We have a smoker. It's automated. The sink, and then this is this guy right here, a tumbler. We use the sink to fix the fish. We dump them in here with brine and marinate. We pull a vacuum on it. It pulls that into the meat. Then it tumbles. You unhook the vacuum, and it tumbles and pulls it all in. When you open that up, there should be no marinade in this thing left. From there, they're loaded on these trays, and they're slid back into this This little smoker here turns on. You put whatever ingredients you want to smoke, if it's cherry wood, if liquid smoke, whatever the recipe calls for, and that's all automatically taken care of. When the finished smoke cease at 187 degrees, it's got a refrigeration unit that cools it all down. When it cools all down, you bring it out and you vacuum pack it. Here we are, here's the tray coming out. You pull it over here, you put it in the vacuum packer, or you take it in here to cool it off. Then you pull it over the vacuum packer and it seals it, and then they put it in the freezer or the refrigerator. So this is what we're doing now. We have just passed our health inspection, we've just passed our state inspection, and we're ready to throw the switch, okay? This is what I made my livelihood at, hybrid striped bass. We sold the first 25,000 head of fish and thought we'd raise more fish than the world could use. The smallest order we had when I left was 10,000 at a time. One farm in California orders 60,000 over the year. We've developed so it's gotten quite large. And the annual, now we have, like one friend of mine has 160, he just added 600 acres of hybrid striped bass to his farm, which is already 400 and some acres. So hybrid striped bass, you sell it generally on the ice to restaurants. They go worldwide. We sold some to Israel. We sold some to California when I was in London. Looked over and here's hybrid striped bass from Israel. Here's hybrid striped bass from California, Kent Sea Farms. They both came from Keogh, Arkansas. So I've seen my fish all over the world. This is what they look like, fingerlings. They're dumped in the pond. We stock about 3 to 4,000 head of fish per acre, and in 12 months to a year, they are £1.25 to 2 pounds. They sell for $3 to $3.50 a pound. So every 2 pound fish there is worth what? $7. And you've got 4,000 per acre. 7 times 4,000 is how much an acre? That's better than farming, isn't it? And it costs less than farming. So why do we grow cows? You don't see a whole lot of cows in Taiwan. You don't see a whole lot of cows where people need protein, and there are a lot of them. Our cows, and I like cows. I like T-bones. We just bought a half a beef, didn't we? I love it. But economically, energy-wise, doesn't work out. This is what it looks like when there's just 2 of us sitting in a 5-acre pond. We bait them down at this end. They come to feed, wade across. We've done this under the ice. Pull this under the ice. Pull the backhoe over here, tie up to it, drag it around, bring it over here where we started, gather it up, put seine stakes. You see this friend of mine? He never gets in the water. I got him some waders this year that he can't not stay out of the water, okay? Gather up the seine. I get in with them. This is what they look like. Go in here, you load them up. You pick them up. Notice the scale here. Tells you how many pounds of fish you've got. You pick them up, drop them in here. It's already filled with ice. See the bottom chute here? He gets it over, pulls the bottom chute, and those 2 pound fish fall. Go back, pick up whatever we need. If we've got 400 to 1,000 pounds, we can normally do that pond early in the morning, March, January, February, December. Be done, start at 7, and by 10 o'clock we were on the road with the back of the truck headed to Louisville. So, our new species. Hey, how many people here have ever caught a largemouth bass? Right? Have you ever seen them on the restaurant for sale? Not really. They're wild fish. They're protected by Game and Fish. I thought I recognized you. Anyway, we can now feed train them. There's a gentleman in Illinois who's been doing them for 30 years. We feed train them till they don't eat each other. So cannibalistic, a 2 pound largemouth can eat another 2 pound largemouth. Okay? They can grow to 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds on the same feed, the same amount of time as the hybrid striped bass. Do you see what that gets a pound down there? Catfish is 70 cents, 50 cents to 70 cents to the farmer. I don't raise a lot of catfish. We've got 10 acres of them, okay? But the key to this thing is, boy, the restaurants love it. Toronto, the ethnic market, they really want this fish. They pull up with a semi and you clear out a 5-acre pond, load the semi, and away they go. So they haul them all the way back up into Canada. So this fish is growing in popularity. Plus, it's something that'll help aquaculture make its way. It's worth more. And it's a pleasing white fillet. A lot of restaurants. So we're looking more for the restaurant trade. This year, bad, dry year, wonderful year for a guy like me who wants to move dirt, right? Build some more ponds. Well, we started on these ponds. We picked out we're going to put in 4 5-acre ponds. We had to move about 10 acres of woods, so I rented a track hoe. I got in a track hoe. It was air conditioned. My Caterpillar buddy, he never operated a dozer before, although he was in charge of walking them off the assembly line and testing the motors. Guess what? I taught him how to operate the bulldozer. He worked it all summer. Along with him and my minister who loved that, he learned to operate the dozer. I stayed in the air conditioning. Then we built some smaller ponds also at the same time. The area we're developing is below these trees, from there to there. We built this smaller pond here. This is my minister. He's moving a smaller dirt pan. When we got ready to do the big ponds, we called in the big guns. This little tractor right here is 430 horsepower. It pulls 2 18-yard buckets, so you're moving 36 yards of dirt at a time. It should have moved a load every 6 minutes. So when you're building that much earth, this is where, you see down here, we've got the corn cut, and then every 5-acre pond is outlined in a trench which we fill back in to keep water from seeping from one pond to the other. It's called coring. This is the end results. The levees, that's 1 acre wide, 5 acres long. That's the woods. And this is just to give you an idea of the levees. They go from 4 feet here to 10 feet, 12 feet at the end. We have 2 foot of water to 10 foot of water. And we have seines that'll cover one end and you just walk it to the other end. Okay, you can get an idea. That's a 3/4 ton Dodge pickup down there. That's that dozer. This is one of the levees. Remember the first time we had a rain? That's what it looked like when you get caught. Okay, so we cleared it out. There's the dozer. Okay, and there's a little better. This crossed some of our ponds. These are full of hybrid striped bass. That's full of largemouth bass. So we're going to add 20 acres, 20 acres, 20 acres. We're going to do a lot of largemouth. We're going to do a lot of hybrid striped bass. The paddlefish are swimming in all these ponds, like 1 or 2 per acre. And that's just our broodstock. We have, working with a farmer, catfish farmer in Missouri, we've got acres and acres. We've got probably 20,000 paddlefish out there waiting to grow. So every year we're looking to process 20 to 30,000 paddlefish for food. So this is all new. This is the first go around anywhere. And that's it.